Arkansas Flood in 1927. This is a documentary video on the Arkansas Flood in 1927. It's how to tell the story from the flood from the entire state's perspective, but more focused on Pulaski County. So it was spring of 1927 in Arkansas. All the winter snowmelt in the United States was melting. But snowmelts across North America caused the snowmelt into rivers like the Mississippi River. All across Arkansas, there are major rivers flowing through it, including the Mississippi, St. Francis, White, and Arkansas, or just to name a few rivers that flow through the entire state. As spring was here in Arkansas, the rain came into the state and its rivers. The snow melts across North America, and the spring rain caused a problem in Arkansas. The Mississippi River flowing through the state and across the central United States started to flood. This flood of the Mississippi was caused by the snow melting and the spring rain like mentioned before. During the spring, the Mississippi River was at 40 feet from March 27th to April 3rd, and again from April 7th to May 7th. As the Mississippi River flooded, so did Arkansas rivers. This flood of the Mississippi backed up the Arkansas, White, and St. Francis rivers in Arkansas. These river floods also started flooding into lands and towns across the state, including Stuttgart, Montrose, Arkansas City, Helena, West Helena, Little Rock, and so many more cities and towns across the state, close to rivers as seen in this documentary. One city that was one of the most affected by this flood of the flooding rivers was Little Rock. This flooding caused a problem to the city and its people, but Little Rockans had to be helped by the American Red Cross and the federal government to get evacuated and recover. This flood of spring 1927 is called the Mississippi River Flood of 1927 and impacted many states, but Arkansas was the hardest hit. These river floods across the state was the worst flooding in Arkansas history to date. As this documentary continues, I'll talk about the start of the flood in Pulaski County. Next, I'll talk about the impacts the flood had on Arkansas and Pulaski County. Lastly, I'll talk about the relief efforts the American Red Cross and the federal government did to help Arkansans during the flood. So let's first look at the beginning of the flood in Pulaski County. Beginning of the flood in Arkansas and Little Rock. Little Rock is the capital, largest city, and central place in Arkansas and is settled on the Arkansas River. Arkansas River flows through the state from north to south and flows right through Pulaski County, splitting Little Rock and North Little Rock. The spring of 1927 brought tremendous amounts of rain across the state with heavy amounts measured everywhere. Rain amounts across the state measured from 20 inches plus around Hot Springs and 12 to 16 inches in Little Rock, North Little Rock, and the rest of Pulaski County. In particular, in the first half of April, it was recorded in Little Rock more than 10 inches of rain fell, and it was recorded on April 20th. In particular, 7 inches of rain fell in a 12-hour period in Little Rock. These heavy rain showers fell into rivers across Arkansas, including the White, St. Francis, and Arkansas, like mentioned before. The Mississippi River was already flooding because of the snowmelts, and the Arkansas River was backing up because of the Mississippi River flooding. With these heavy rain amounts across the state, this was causing flooding in Arkansas rivers, also including the Arkansas. These heavy rains and backup rivers caused starting to flood in Little Rock and Pulaski County on Easter Sunday, which was April 17th, 1927. As the Arkansas River started to overflow with rainwater and backlogged water going into the Mississippi, Arkansas River started to overflow and flood into towns and cities across Arkansas, like mentioned before in this documentary. This was the start of something bigger in Arkansas and Little Rock for months to come for towns and cities across the state. The impacts the river floodings had on Arkansas and the state as a whole, especially in Pulaski County. So as the rain began coming down and the rivers across Arkansas rushed with water, and this land and people were not prepared. The rivers across Arkansas filled with water finally gave way to its levees along the Arkansas, St. Francis, and White rivers. The rivers across the state flowing with water caused 26 breaks on the Arkansas River, 67 on the White River, and 12 on the St. Francis River to collapse with water. These 115 broken levees across Arkansas rivers caused flooding into lands and cities. The overflowing rivers from the broken levees caused the water to flood over 2 million acres and 6,600 square miles of water into Arkansas lands, cities, and towns. But flood water into the land caused 55,000 homes in Arkansas to be flooded, impacted over 350,000 people in the state. These floods across Arkansas caused problems also in Little Rock and North Little Rock. It's recorded in Little Rock by the American Red Cross that districts along the riverbank suffered the most flood. In North Little Rock, it was also recorded by the American Red Cross that the sections along the Arkansas River had the deepest water. These two major cities in Arkansas and Pulaski County were flooded by the Arkansas River and have flooded waters inside the city streets and buildings. It was also approximately that 100 people died from the flood waters in cities and towns across the state. This flood also caused damage to transportation as seen in the photos of this documentary, like trains and cars. So much damage to its lands, people, and transportation that there were recovery efforts after the flood that lasted after the rainy flooding and devastating spring of 1927. Lastly, the relief efforts from the flooding rivers and its damage to the cities, towns, and people. While the rivers flowed over into Arkansas lands, into cities and towns, but relief efforts were on its way. But recovery efforts were brought by the American Red Cross and the federal government. From April 15th to May 1st, the American Red Cross in Pulaski County bent efforts toward saving lives from the flooding. But ground level help was not the only way of helping people, as 18 seaplanes flew daily reconnaissance missions just several hundred feet above the floodwaters to locate refugees and to land food and medical supplies to people across Arkansas. The American Red Cross also made efforts by making refugee camps across the state. Camps were established in Little Rock and North Little Rock. In Little Rock, it was located at Fair Park. In some instances of making refugee camps was hard to be camped because of the flooding into land, so the camps had to be on higher ground where the water was not located. The American Red Cross was stationed in Little Rock at 600 West Markham Street during the time of the flood. This station where the American Red Cross was, where they distribute used clothing, donated food, and household goods assembled to Arkansans who need assistance and help from the flood. In Little Rock, 1,106 families applied for relief, and in North Little Rock, 601 families applied for relief. On April 15, 1927 through June 11, 1928, Little Rock was reported by the financial report from the American Red Cross that it cost $3,400,551.71 for food, shelter, and supplies altogether. In North Little Rock, it was also reported by the American Red Cross that it cost much less for food, supplies, and shelter, with a total of $1,239.20, which was dramatically less than Little Rock's number, with a difference in total of $3,300,312.50. The American Red Cross helped over 200,000 Arkansans during the flood. As the American Red Cross was helping Arkansans during the flood, the federal government was helping too. The president during this time, Calvin Coolidge, enacted Hubert Hoover to be the head of relief for the flood across the country and in Arkansas. Hubert Hoover even visited Arkansas during the flood of 1927 to see the damage the floods brought to the state. He saw how bad the impacts of the flood was that he made the federal government put $1 to $2 million in relief money from the federal government to help the flooded states like Arkansas, to help rebuild roads and bridges and help with recovery efforts to towns and cities and people from these river floods. In June of 1927, a speech by the state government held a night for the flood at the state capitol in Arkansas acclaimed Hoover as the man who saved the lower Mississippi Valley. After the federal government helped by giving relief money to the state and viewing the damage, Arkansas remained underwater through the spring and summer and into September of 1927, still after the river floods in the spring. This made the American Red Cross still keep camps up around Arkansas until September 15th. After the floodwaters dried out into the lands, the American Red Cross helped rebuild homes and businesses in Arkansas, including Pulaski County, where it cost $25,924,075 of building and repair. These river floods across Arkansas brought so much damage to the land and people that it was a hard time to recover from this devastating flood. Luckily, Arkansas helped on its way through the journey. As I told for this documentary, I highlighted the big impacts of the flood and how it started by the backlog of the Mississippi River and how it backlogged Arkansas, St. Francis, and the White River into Arkansas. Next, I highlighted how Pulaski County was affected by the Arkansas River flood. Then I talked about the Arkansas River impact on Arkansas lands and its people. Lastly, I talked about the relief efforts by the American Red Cross and the federal government helping Arkansas and the country during the Mississippi River flood and Arkansas River floods of 1927. This flood of 1927 will be a story in Arkansas for generations to come because of the impacts it had on its lands and people. Miss Arkansas flood 1927/Mississippi River flood 1927 had a big impacts on Arkansas and the country, but Arkansas was the most affected by these floods. This flood of 1927 Arkansas has not seen a flood of that much impact since, and hopefully never sees anything like that anytime soon. As you see in all the photos in this documentary, the flood impacted Arkansas devastatingly and impacted unmatchably. I will keep showing photos until the end of this video, and I will play music in the background, and at the end I will give sources of how I gathered this information. Thank you for listening, watching it, and the sources to make my documentary video on the Arkansas flood of 1927 possible. Here's the list of sources and bibliography.